Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the KeithAndrewNetWork. This is episode 467. I am your host, Keith Andrew, and today we have Mr. Michael on our show. And Mike, I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my show.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it, man.
No, absolutely. And you asked the question before we got started, what was the point of this belt? And I wanted to show you, even though it's falling apart. Yeah, money well spent, right? Basically, the whole point of this belt is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. And to prove to them you can break the labels. And I wanted to reward myself after 4.5 years. This June will be 5. But after 4.5 years of hard work and a couple of setbacks, I wanted to show people, hey, if a kid who reads and learns at a 5th grade level can make mistakes but get a handful of great people on the show, then he should be an inspiration for people out there with disabilities, saying, don't let people label you, and you should prove to them you can break the labels. So that being said, it's a real honor and privilege to have you as a guest on the show.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you some easy questions, some hard-hitting ones. And starting off, what can you tell us about yourself?
So my name is Michael Dote. I'm 31 years old. I have founded a company called Foxing Productions, and I have a disability. I have schizoaffective disorder. Essentially, it's a mix of schizoid symptoms and affective symptoms, similar to bipolar, most similar to bipolar and schizophrenia. I'm an avid fencer. I kind of train and compete a couple days a week, usually 3 or 4 days on average. I also am kind of embroiled in running my company, which, all things considered, is doing decently for its 2nd or 3rd year in business. We're in between 2 and 3 years of business. We won a Shorty Award with some of the content we produced 2 years ago, which was a pretty cool thing. And yeah, just a normal human being that has been put into kind of an extraordinarily difficult set of circumstances, and I'm happy that I've been able to fight through them.
No, absolutely. And I saw one of the things I was going to ask you, as you mentioned you are a fencer. For people who want to know what that means, you are actually in mixed martial arts. You don't actually go out and fix fences.
No, yeah, it's not mixed martial arts, and it's definitely not fixing fences. The sport in French is known as escrime, in Spanish, esgrima. In German, they call it fechten. In Italy, skirma. Essentially, the sport is a combat sport. It's an Olympic sport as well. So I know many of the people who are on the Olympic team and who have medaled in various Olympics over time. I know a lot of them personally, and some of my photographic work has featured them. And yeah, it's a really good sport. So it's less like MMA, though. I think someone honestly would kick my ass under most circumstances. Totally not a violent person in that regard. But the sport is, at its core, a combat sport. So you do get jostled sometimes, though it's one of the safest sports out there.
No, absolutely. Now, my next question I was going to ask you is, what is a peace? Mention yourself as a peacemaker. What is a peacemaker?
Well, I think ultimately we are all faced with conflict in different ways. A lot of the times I find that when I'm doing production on a photo set or a video set, there are many people who are coming from very different perspectives, different walks of life, different kind of understandings of the universe. I just try my best to make sure that everything ends up hunky-dory and copacetic on the days that I work. A lot of that is becoming a bridge between people from different cultures and different understandings of the world, along with different creative visions. So I guess that's what peacemaker means at its core to me, and that's what I'm doing. It's definitely not something. It sounds a lot sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. Most of the time, it's just getting people to sit down and talk with each other in an honest and kind of unfiltered way.
Alright,
Well,
so kind of like uncensored.
uncensored, you said?
Yeah, you said it like in an unfiltered way. An unfiltered way.
Unfiltered, however, still remaining respectful.
Right.
I think that is largely the thing, because people very often in our culture will say one thing and they'll dance around the topic rather than actually confronting the issues at hand.
No, absolutely.
One just made a weird noise. Hold on one sec.
Hey, anything can happen in life.
Yeah.
Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, I saw you, and you did mention you are a founder. Who influenced you to start your own company, and how many years have you been a founder?
So I founded Foxing Productions about two or 3 years ago, and to be honest, the decision is something that I've thought about for a long time. I'm really heavily influenced by a lot of the people in the co-working space that I'm in now, which is around here, called District Co-work. There's a lot of people who have founded companies who are doing really tremendous things. I honestly think, I always feel like the midget on the shoulder of giants. Really inspired by a lot of the VC community and the angel investor community that I've encountered. Brian Cohen in particular is someone I find really inspiring. Neil Brar, who is someone who owns this co-working space and has founded that, and has also founded kind of a couple other things, especially the cryptocurrency space. And yeah, I'm always inspired by anyone who sets out and says, you know what, I don't want to follow the rules that were set. I would like to make my own rules.
No, absolutely. And for an example, you can use me for an example.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all within moderation, though, too, because if you are establishing your own set of rules, you still have to interact with others, which gets really back to that peacemaking topic.
No, absolutely. Now, the next question I was going to ask you, we can go back to these in a couple minutes, is you did mention you have a disability. What can you tell us about your disability, and has that labeled you or hindered you from doing what you love?
Well, yes and no. So my disability is schizoaffective disorder. It's essentially a cousin to schizophrenia, which is voice hearing, paranoia, and delusions. I also have some affect-based symptoms where I will get manic sometimes. Usually I'm on the manic end of the spectrum rather than the depressive end of the spectrum, but I have a little bit of both from time to time. For me, depression looks like staying in bed an extra 30 minutes. Manic usually is the worst side of things for me, which is me sleeping only 3 hours a night. Usually I'm monitoring it via sleep with the Fitbit, which I have on over here. Yeah, and it has hindered me in some ways, because as soon as you mention the word schizophrenia to someone in a creative industry, it sets up red flags for them, because they're used to the kind of pre-canned, cookie-cutter explanation of things where they're like, okay, this guy is nuts. They think it's multiple personality disorder, they think it's some sort of Fight Club type thing. But for me, it just manifests as I hear one voice and I have to take medication. I take medication and it keeps my system sound and in good shape, keeps my sleep schedule relatively under wraps, and I just have to be smart about things. If I'm encountering difficulties, like if I know I'm pushing myself too hard, I have to know and self-monitor and be like, okay, now I'm taking a break. I'm taking a day off, which honestly, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. I'm kind of a workaholic, and I realize that if I do not monitor my habits, then I end up in trouble. Then I end up feeling not so great or potentially hospitalized.
All right. Now, how have you overcome your disabilities?
A lot of it is just finding the right doctor, the right medication, the right treatment plan, and being the right patient. Being the right patient for all of that. I'm currently actually in the midst of switching things around with doctors, but a lot of it is just getting out into the world and being. A friend of mine whose father's a psychiatrist and mother's a psychiatrist said to me something really great about 10 years ago. He said, it's not the medication that heals you. The medication gets you into the world. It's the world that is not what heals you. And I really took that to heart. I thought that was a really amazing kind of statement. And I really stood by it. I think that, yeah, medication will normalize certain symptoms. The fact is, though, the world is really what will stop you from taking those symptoms and doing something harmful.
No, absolutely. And now, what would you say for people out there that want to follow in your footsteps?
I didn't hear you, sorry?
Now, for people who want to follow in your footsteps, what would you have to tell them?
Honestly, I don't want people to follow in my footsteps. I want them to make their own. I really, look, everyone is different. Everyone has a different set of characteristics. Don't walk in my footsteps, walk in your own. And I'll watch them. I'd like to see them side by side. That's really how I feel about things. I think that, yeah, you can try to make as big an imprint as you'd like, but what I'd rather have than someone walking behind me is walking side by side with someone who is struggling in their own way. And I think we all struggle, whether it's labeled as a disability or not, whether it is something that we deal with on a medical level or a psychological level or a fiscal level, whatever it is, we all have struggles, So for me, it's just I'd rather be side by side with people who are struggling rather than having someone walk in my shadow.
No, absolutely. Now, the next question I was going to ask you, you also mentioned you're a filmmaker. What type of films have you produced, and what films are you working on?
Well, in the past, I worked on a couple films in a couple different genres. Worked on a documentary called Dahlia, which was really amazing. It was about domestic violence and domestic abuse, and about the struggles that people encounter when they are encountering partner violence. So I worked on that quite a bit, and having seen some of that in the home front, more so on the kind of control end of the spectrum rather than the actual physical violence, it was really a meaningful project to work on as director of photography, and also to take some hand in production. The other thing that I really worked on and enjoyed quite a bit, have been a couple narrative films, and I'm working now on a documentary feature, which was titled Unmasked, but now we're going with The Gentleman's Determination for the title.
Right.
Which is a documentary detailing my struggles with mental illness. It's an autobiographical documentary detailing my struggles with mental illness and kind of reintegrating into the sport of fencing and the community of fencing as an individual. And I have a good chance of winning nationals if I can keep my training schedule and regiment in order, which could be really cool. It could be really cool to win nationals in fencing. It's not going to be easy. A lot of it requires getting in better shape. Right now, I'm not in optimal shape, but getting closer to it. I was in a little bit better shape a couple months ago before hospitalization. But yeah, I think it's actually a really good thing. So that's one thing I'm working on. And just a couple minutes ago, for roughly 4 to 5 hours ago, I came up with an idea for a pretty cool short film, which would be a narrative film called Il Mariolo or El Picanio. And it's essentially going to just, I'm going to actually work with myself. I have a little bit of an M, a scorpion M on the side of my head. I don't know if you can see it. But essentially I would play a role in that where I would kind of like beckon things out of people's pockets with my hands. The word in Spanish and in Italian means rogue. Or kind of like, in Italian it also has the connotation of being like a bad wizard. So it would be someone who uses that skill to pickpocket people, to make women turned on when he's sitting across from them at a coffee table, and then uses that to like swoop in. That's at least the start of the idea, and that's in the concepting stage. We'll likely shoot that over a course of a 3 or 4 day weekend in April, and the documentary Unmasked is still ongoing. Transferring footage now, but we have about 8 terabytes of footage, roughly, for that doc. So that is going to probably amount to be a feature film. ideally would like to encounter someone from Disney to see if they would pick it up as a doc, because it does have the trappings of something that could be similar to Cool Runnings or the Mighty Ducks. One of those unexpected moments where it's not someone that you expect to win will win. The underdog can take the cake, I guess.
No, I agree. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, would you ever do, trying to find the words for it, two part in one. Two parts in one. First part is, would you ever be interested in sponsoring someone? And have you ever thought about sponsoring?
Sponsoring, well, I've actually looked for sponsors for projects more so than actually sponsored people. I have helped people get their visas. So I guess a point of clarification, what do you mean necessarily by sponsorship?
I like hypothetically, speak and say you met someone who has wanted their own studio, and in return you would pay for the studio rights. You would I don't know, just use me for an example. You would pay for me to use the studio, but in return you get your name on it and saying the following is brought to you by your company, and then it says, like that type of stuff is sponsoring.
Well, I have done that with events in the past, with nonprofits. Typically, what I choose to do is work with nonprofit organizations rather than individuals. But yeah, at this point, I'm kind of low on the resource end of the spectrum. To be honest, I'm struggling financially, and it's been a really tough kind of journey, because I spent roughly a month and a half in a psychiatric hospital at the last 2.5, 3 months. So that really left me in a bad place with my company. It's been a lot of kind of waiting around for things to happen rather than making things happen. And I have a couple bids out for jobs that are actually pretty interesting. I just have to actually get those gigs in, and then I'm in a better spot. I'm also considering relocating to probably somewhere subtropical. A lot of the time, living in the New York area is really expensive. So I am thinking, instead of hemorrhaging out resources, I'd move to somewhere like Asunción, Paraguay, where life is a lot more affordable. Looking into expat communities there now.
All right. Now, other question I was going to ask you is, you mentioned you are an educator and you're a photographer.
Yes.
How much do you charge for doing headshots, or what type of photographer are you? That's number one. And number two is, what type of educator are you?
What kind of educator? Okay, so I guess I can answer that in a couple different ways. I've taught people fencing on and off for 5 out of the last 15 years, if not more. So I've been involved with teaching of fencing a lot. And I also do help on occasion Teachers Assist programs at the International Center of Photography, which is a pretty cool program. What they do is they offer kind of adult continuing ed classes in photography. So on the photography end of the spectrum, my rates do vary. It usually starts at about $750 or $800 for a headshot session. That's US dollars, and then can go up depending on the project to as much as $4,000 to $5,000 a day on the low end for a commercial gig, and a lot more for on the high end. A lot of it is just how you brand yourself as a photographer, and it's often that my rates end up turning away some potential clients, which I don't like. So I do offer discounts on occasion to fill up my schedule. That's usually where a lot of my friends and family end up coming in. They will come in during discounted sessions, and yeah, a lot of it comes in as a referral too. Referral business is always appreciated. I do cut people who refer me a lot of business and really good deals.
So, for an example, it's kind of like pro bono.
No, incorrect. For example, let's say someone has referred me 3 or 4 headshot clients. I'll often do a headshot at cost for them, which is about half the cost that of the normal rate. So that's usually how I work it out. If you refer me 3 or more clients, you will get your session at cost. Pro bono typically is where people will come in and try to get a lot of services without necessarily offering a whole lot. And those are the people I found that are the most demanding and the least helpful.
Right.
You know, especially because, you know, there's a difference between a value-based client and a cost client. It depends on what they value. I'm all about the value clients where they want to maximize the value. I will always try to add value when possible. But when I'm dealing with cost-based clients, they just want to maximize their return on any amount of money spent, and they don't really place a lot of consideration. They don't place a whole lot of consideration on the way that they are dealing with freelancers in general. They look at them as disposable a lot of the time.
All right. And now my other question I was going to ask you is, how do you feel about social media? Do you think social media can make you or break you? And with everything that you do, how does it dictate?
I think it can do a lot. You can do a lot with social media that can be really helpful. At the same time, you have to be conscious of the things you're doing, especially on social media, because it can be out there for a lot of people to use and to utilize. So I've encountered it, and it's kind of a mixed bag. I actually do not like the terms of service for Instagram, for example. So I've been uploading a lot less content to it. I used to kind of do that very, very consistently. I think that there's a lot to be learned and garnered from the way that people deal with social media. I think sometimes people look at it as a replacement for actual real life rather than as a supplement. So I would encourage people to live their lives and not spend less time in front of their computer. Life is less a spectator sport. Life is less fun as a spectator sport.
All right. With that being said, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And it was the last 10 minutes left of your show. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay. Well, no, I honestly, I'm quite happy with the interview at this point. I think things went really well.
Arlene Schofield.
My name is Shireen Snow.
My name is Carla A. Miles.
Diana Camuto.
This is Christine Dunford.
I'm me, Eden.
Caroline Macy. This is Walker Fannin.
Lydia Camille Dixon.
I'm Miss Dates Wardam.
My name is Linda Preston, and you're watching the Keith Andrew Network.
Me, Mark Medley. Hi, everybody, this is Mark Neely.
Barry Papick.
This is Peter Bruno.
My name is Kyle Collier. This is Julio Santiago, better known as Dynamite.
I'm Richard Epcar.
Lawrence Chow.
This is Kerrigan Mahan.
This is Goldar.
And we both support
Keith Andrew.
My name is Ron Wasserman, and I am supporting Keith Andrew and what he is doing, and you better do the same, or I'm going to come kick your ass.
When you are.
Ladies and gentlemen, what's the last 9 minutes left of the show? I am here as Mike Dote, and with that being said, I'm going to pass the show over to you. You can ask me anything you want, talk about anything you want, promote anything you want. This is your time, and I'm passing the show over to you.
Well, you know, I'm just really happy that I've been able to be on this show, and I'm really grateful, and thank you, sincerely. You know, I think that there's a lot to be gained by people just recognizing that we all have value. All of our lives have value, regardless of the number next to our name or the label that's been placed upon us. Our lives, collectively as human beings, have so much worth, and we should respect that. I think that that's super important, and I think that's something that's overlooked, is that instead of actually looking for ways out of problems, we should look for ways to fight through them. You know, every issue that we encounter, you know, there's a great Winston Churchill quote, actually. I'd rather quote him than anything else. He said, the best way out of hell is through it. And I think that that's a profound quote, because we all encounter our difficult circumstances. We all encounter the times that feel really hellish and feel really shitty. If we are able to fight through those circumstances, then we get stronger as human beings. Every time that I've been knocked down, I've fought hard to get up. And this is one of those times where I have been knocked down again. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to stand up and able to be part of this interview and just able to be capable as a person. Disability does not mean one is not able. It means one has to deal with their abilities in a different way. I'm grateful for many of the people who helped me along the way, who are too numerous to name individually. But yeah, I think gratitude is ultimately the ingredient necessary to fight any kind of debilitating circumstances.
No, absolutely. With that being said, I do have two questions for you, and then we can talk off the air. The first one is, are you on social media? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter, Stage 32? Are you on any of those fun things?
I'm on LinkedIn. That is Mike Dote, I think. Michael Dote. You can look for me there. I'm a LinkedIn Open Networker. I will generally accept that. I'm on Facebook as Mike Dote. www.facebook.com/MICHAEL.DOTE. I'm also on Twitter as Michael_J_Dote, DOTE. You can also find my website, which is mikedote.com or mikedote.com. That you'll find more portfolio at, as well as my directing reel. And yeah, easy to find. I make myself as accessible as possible because the opportunity that can arise from dealing with individuals, it far exceeds any closed-offness.
No, absolutely. Now, my last question for you is, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what was your first reaction? And after being interviewed, how did you feel now?
Well, my first reaction was one of gratitude, and I feel the same way now. I'm open to speaking on important topics, and I think that especially mental illness is a topic that people overlook. The topic that people would just rather deal with another time, or deal with it's air quotes somebody else's problem. However, I think mental illness and addiction and all of these things that people face have to be addressed. Because if they're not addressed, then they do boil over and become larger issues.
No, absolutely. Now, we're wrapping up our interview segment. It was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. And let's do part 2 down the road.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to do a follow-up. Thank you so much, man.